Hello, friends. Welcome back to O for Dying Out Loud. I'm your host, Angie, the Magical Life Midwife, and joining me today is
I'm Laura, your dazzling death doula and
fabulous.
friend. And friend.
Hello. Hello. And so, as you may know from our last podcast 2 weeks ago, we're kind of shifting gears a little bit. We talk a lot about death, dying, and all those things, so that we can learn to live a little bit more fully
Out
and
loud.
with meaning. And
Yeah.
and this is prompted from the book, The Measure. Have you finished it yet?
I did. I'm so glad you asked that question because I was going to text you when I finished. I said, no, I'm saving this reaction. So anyone
Are
here,
you really?
yeah, go back to last week or the last episode.
Yeah.
I did finish it. And first of all, I wept
Yeah. Same.
crazily.
Same. The very
And
last paragraph, I'm like, oh my
right,
God, this is
right to the end.
beautiful.
I'm in
Yeah.
the hospital. My dad is having surgery on his back. He's fine. And
Yay.
I'm just up in this room, finishing, like up in the waiting room, just reading this book. And I'm just sobbing, trying not to be sobbing, but also there's no tissues, of course, because we don't have a nice VA hospital for people, because why would
Right.
we have tissues?
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm up there sobbing. So I finished it. And everything's a little crazy in the world right now, in the space and time that we currently live in. I like to tell people we've lived through like global pandemic, we've lived through
So
crazy.
much.
So yeah.
Mm.
So this book was this, I could hear my grandmother say to me, it all comes out in the wash.
Right. Right. Yes. Yes, that was the thing that was so beautiful. I
Yes.
don't want to really spoil the ending for
Yeah.
people who haven't read
Sorry.
the book. Need to read the book, but that
No.
last paragraph, it ties up all these little threads through
Yeah.
all these different
Mhm.
characters into a beautiful little bow
Yeah.
that just kind of is that. It's
It's
just
like a
like
cleansing breath.
it is. It's a cleansing breath to know that you know what, no matter what, things are going to work out.
Yes.
It's
Well, and
going to
I,
work.
I, as a person who's worked in death positivity, I really tried, to focus people on the idea that, my mom always says, don't worry, don't borrow trouble. Like we have enough things in our lives to worry about. Don't worry about stuff that isn't yours to worry about.
Yeah.
And my grandma was famous for saying things like, if the good Lord's willing and the creek don't rise.
Yeah.
That was crazy, but that's
Yeah.
what she said that to me every day.
Yeah.
So it all kind of harkens back to this idea that what's going to happen is going to happen.
Right.
And I will just like sometimes as I'm watching Josh Gates, who I'm secretly in love with, on, on his show. Sometimes I'll be watching a show like that, and they're going back in time to historical moments, or like when the volcanoes or Atlantis sunk, or I think about all these things, and I'm like, people lived through that, or they died. Either
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
and yeah. So that
And it
book
doesn't
was
diminish the emotions
right,
at all, right? I
right.
think
No,
the most beautiful part of it is
mm-hmm.
the ability to step back and go, yes, these difficult emotions
Yep.
are part of it.
Yeah.
And it's all beautiful in its own way.
Yes.
It will have meaning.
Yeah.
Like the thing that I think really resonated for me was that what's the saying that is often used in spiritual bypassing? It's kind of a pain in the butt. Like it when somebody passes, well, everything happens for a reason.
Yes.
Mm, wrong. But what is different, and what this book seems to say in lieu of that, is everything has meaning.
Yes. Yeah.
Everything has meaning. So even
Yeah.
though you're not feeling good about what's happened, you're
Mm-hmm.
grieving, you're angry, you're sad,
Right.
it does have meaning.
Yes. There. Yes.
So
And what a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I cannot, like, that was the most profound thing for me at the end of that book. Uh, I really fought myself about whether I was going to tell you I finished or not. And I decided to keep it for this moment where I got to say the words, because I was afraid that if I told you too soon that I wouldn't have the same sort of excited emotion. But
Yeah.
the most wonderful piece of that at the end for me was everything does come out in the wash, even if it comes out a little stained or bleached or whatever.
Paint.
It comes
Yeah.
out. Everything comes out in the wash, um,
Yeah.
one way or another.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and that
Yes.
I find peace in I find peace in that.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. I love that metaphor. It's like, yeah, you know what? I dyed my white pants pink, because I left something red in the wash. But you know what? Now I've got a pink pair of pants,
Yep.
you know?
Yep.
So the point is that it's you, we, things happen.
Right.
We have to ask ourselves, what am I making this mean
Yeah.
to me, to others, etc.? And then we use that information to move forward,
Hmm. Yeah.
in whatever best way we can.
Yep.
So yeah, it's I'm glad you finished it.
Yes.
And we got to chat about that. So in light of this, we've decided, let's talk about spiritual topics and other
Mhm.
topics that we have used that help us bring more meaning into our lives,
Mhm.
knowing that the measure of our life on this planet, in our incarnation, in this time and space, is limited.
Right.
We are unlimited beings, but we are limited here. So previous time, we talked a little bit about journaling and how important that is, or can be a useful tool to get to know ourselves. And how do we process information? How do we make meaning out of things? And what do I want to do? So, I mean, journaling is not just throw it up on the page. It's about, okay, let me process, digest these events and see what it means to me and what can I learn from this, right? So today we decided we were going to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is the moon. So, and how appropriate, because yesterday was the full moon in Capricorn. Holy Moses, lots of full moon energy.
Mhm.
So we're talking specifically a little bit about living in harmony with the cycles of the moon and moon astrology. So let me just kind of set the stage for those who are new to considering, what does it mean to live in harmony with the moon cycles and why would I want to?
Okay.
So interestingly enough, this is an ancient practice. Native American women they had what was called a moon lodge. It was featured very prominently in their culture. And the concept of the moon lodge, which is not just Native American, lots of tribes elsewhere have done this. It is the concept that the moon it has to do with or mirrors our feminine cycles, right? It changes from full to new moon every 28 days, which is about the same time that a woman experiences her menstrual cycles, okay? Now, they believe that when you live in harmony with all of nature, meaning the cycles of fall, spring, summer, winter, the cycles of the lengthening days versus the shortening days, and the moon cycles, that's when you really have excellent health and well-being. Ayurveda, which is yoga's sister science, all about health and well-being, also factors in moon cycles. So moon lodges were usually when the moon was at the new phase. New meaning it's also called dark moon. It's where the moon, you can't see the moon, okay? Is that it's the earth is between the sun and the moon. So it casts a shadow fully on the moon, so you can't see it. It's dark moon. So at the time of the new moon or dark moon, that's generally when women are at their, or anybody really for that matter, but women in particular are at their lowest energy level. And it's usually when they would be on their cycle. So the Moon Lodge was, this is where women would go away for 3 days surrounding when the new moon would happen. And they would go into a tent, no boys allowed, and it was all about rest and rejuvenation. They would sleep, they would get care and teaching from the elder women, all about child rearing, midwife skills, esoteric skills, how to take care of their bodies, um, you know, childbirth, child rearing, all of these things. It was all about nurturing the woman during that time. So that's really what the Moon Lodge was all about. And what's interesting is that there was a book called The Red Tent by Anita Diamante. I think that was back in the late 80s, early 90s that she wrote that. And it was a fictional book, but it was a retelling of the story of Dinah in the Bible from her perspective. And in it, it just happened to be featured that they talked about the red tent. And women all over the world who are reading this book going, hang on, why don't we have this anymore?
Yep.
And so now you're seeing a global resurgence where women are starting to, even if they can't get to a tent or a community
Right.
where they can go and, kind of rest and hang out and support one another, they're creating these supportive communities and they are learning to live in harmony with the moon cycles. What does that look like? New moon, low energy. So once I figured this out, that that's when we're typically at low energy, I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. Why in the world did every month I have this period where I feel like I could sleep for days?
Right.
So what happens? I limit my social planning calendar around those times and I factor in extra self-care when I know the new moon is coming. I have a calendar that tells me the phases of the moon. I don't have to do that. But in our culture, we've kind of gotten away from this, right? We have electric lights, so we can work well into the evening. We don't follow the moon anymore so that we can continue to just push on through. But that's not good for our health, our physical and mental well-being. So since doing that, oh, it's made a huge difference. A huge difference. I
Right.
don't exert myself during that time. Now, full moons on the other side of that spectrum, that's usually a time where we're feeling lots of heightened energy. And this is a celebratory time. Usually, we can feel very heightened emotions. Ask a nurse or anybody who works in the medical field about whether they wanted to work on a full moon.
Yes. Anyone who
Yeah.
works in social work will
Yes.
hear it all. It is definitely a common phrase you will hear. Is it a full
Yeah.
moon right now?
Right, exactly. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just learning about how these energies
Mhm.
uh, have impacts on our lives and how we can work with them for our best, right?
Right.
So full moon energy is really, so at new moon, that's a perfect time of going in, right? When the moon goes dark, it's a metaphor for us going dark, meaning it's a time for going within, self-care, extra meditation, extra journaling reflections. How has the last month gone? What intentions do I want to set for the next moon cycle or the next month or what have you? Is there anything that I want to do differently? What do I need? Full moon energy is about, okay, I've set these intentions at the new moon. Maybe or maybe not, they have come to fruition, but let me be grateful. It's a gratitude ritual is great on full moons to give gratitude for all of the abundance in our lives
Right.
from the smallest little bit.
Mhm.
So as you follow that, so going from new moon to full moon, right? The moon is getting bigger. So our energy is increasing. perfect time for us to start making plans, planting seeds, starting that exercise program again, getting back on track with things, and really harnessing that increasing energy to that full moon peak, right? And then as the full moon then starts to wane, that's an opportunity for us to assess. And once we get to that, what they call the balsamic phase, which is usually the last quarter into the crescent, that's really a time for let's make preparations for slowing it way down. So I love talking to people about the moon. That is the most basic thing that I can share with people in terms of
Okay.
how do we live with the moon cycles. So I want to ask you, Laura,
Mhm.
I know you know a little bit about this because we
I do.
talked about it in our red tent
Yes.
that we have.
Mhm.
But tell me a little bit about how this has impacted your life and your health and well-being. Do you do
Yeah.
anything different?
I do. So first of all, I know I've shared this before, but I always try to be the voice of science.
Mm-hmm.
So for people who get a little, like, this is hoodoo. Yep, like, woo woo. I like to remind them that things like the tides are impacted by the moon. So the ebbs and flows.
Mm-hmm.
And we, of course, are made up of
70% water.
right. So yeah. So I just like to remind people of that.
Yeah.
So I have definitely found that when I can help it,
Mm-hmm.
when I can help it, I definitely try to ensure that, especially towards the new moon times, more so than the full moon. The full moon, I haven't been as good about really taking the initiative for that side of it,
Mm-hmm.
but I have been thoughtful about the new moons because I do get really tired, or
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
everything just has to slow down. And if I can
Right.
be respectful of that, I have found that it is less like slamming into a wall. Uh,
Right.
right, just
Right.
giving myself
Okay.
permission to be like, no, you don't, and sometimes if I haven't done a good planning, um, I will be, why am I out of sorts? Or why am I feeling this way? And then eventually it will occur to me, or I will check and I'll be
Yeah.
like, oh, yes,
Yeah.
okay, yes. But I have gotten better about planning around it, but I'm not as good about um,
Mhm.
taking advantage of the up
Yeah. Yeah.
as I have been about letting myself relax at the down.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's well, and to that end, I do want to share with people a couple of tools that I have used that has been really, really helpful for me. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me find oh, there's the share screen button. So these are a few apps, oops, that I use regularly. So these can be found on Android and iPhone. So this first one is called the Moon Calendar. And what I love about it is that you plug in your birth date, and there is astrology with this. So and this goes into a little bit more depth. So following the moon cycles, just following where new moons and full moons happen can really start you on a path of really harnessing the ebb and flow of energy, because spoiler alert, we're not meant to be on all the time.
Right.
And to your point, when we start recognizing, oh, I'm feeling that downhill slide towards the new moon, it can help us to have a soft landing
Right.
rather than a crash and burn,
Yes.
right? And it can really help to restore us. So that's one of the things that I love about this app, is that it will, I can click on this every day and see where the phase of the moon is. And it will give me a little reading based on my astrological sign, what specifics it will mean for me. And it's got rituals in here, meaning like there's journaling prompts, There's oracle card spreads in here. There's a gratitude ritual. There's a releasing ritual. So there's all kinds of stuff in here to support you in utilizing the moon for your health and well-being and following and sort of tracking that, right? Um, the with regards to astrology, so the moon actually moves into a different astrological sign in the zodiac every 2.5 days. So, for example, just yesterday we had a full moon in Capricorn, which actually was the second full moon in Capricorn that we've had in a month. It just happened to be that way based on the cycles. So, and again, this may be getting woo-woo for people, just bear with us. It's archetypes. It's archetypes and using stories and all these different things that have been used for millennia. These are the traditions that our way back ancestors actually used. And it's really a tool for understanding who we are as a person, who we are in this incarnate. What is the energy around the universe right now, right? So you can take what is useful and leave the rest. That's what I encourage people to do when you're using these tools. So, for example, full moon in Capricorn. Capricorn is the goat. Capricorn is the boss. Gets done. Gets it done. And they kind of eliminate the emotional side of things. It's all business. On the shadow side of that, it can be all work and no play. It can feel very intense because it feels like there's not a lot of emotion to it, not a lot of empathy. It's just a lot of extra work. So people who have a Capricorn sun sign or moon sign in their natal chart would have felt that way more intensely than the general public. We all would feel that way, but Cap, sun, or moon in your natal chart will make you feel it more intensely. So it just kind of gives you, again, a little bit of an energy reading that really, really helps you. So there's a couple of different screenshots there about what it looks like. I think it's free. Yeah, it's free. And if you want additional services, you can purchase some of the in-app stuff. I don't. I just get the daily, which is great. Now, another gal, let me see if this will let me do it. Okay, so this is another app that I have. Chani Nichols is an astrologer, and she does the same thing. It's all astrology, but she will factor in there new moon, full moon, the moon phases feature prominently, as you can see here. And so this is another great free app. There are also in-app purchases that you can do. But she's got a more fun, lighthearted, irreverent take on astrology. So there's the daily horoscopes. The app is horoscopes for all of these different signs. So you can go to her website and get more information, but that's another app that I use on the regular. And then this one is called The Pattern. This is again about astrology, and it's really in depth, and I do really love it. What it will do is it'll go dive deep into your astrology, but you can get real in-depth information about your pattern, meaning in-depth insights about not only your personality based on your natal chart, but what kinds of patterns are you going through right now? Because it changes over time, depending on what's happening in the world, what's happening in the skies. Another thing that I love is that you can get other people, and Laura Shaw, I think you should get in here and get this app, because I can then set you up as a friend and we can run a bond. And what this will do then is tell us a little bit about our compatibility with our friends, with our spouses or partners. And you can see where are the challenges, where are the juicy spots, and it can really help you navigate your relationships a lot better. Um, they do have Connect dating. When and if I'm ever decided to get back onto dating, I'm thinking about doing this because I think it might actually be useful. But it is really very cool. I wonder, it won't let me probably log in to show you more of that, but and I'm not going to put this out here for all the world to see, but you can get your birth chart done here, your natal astrological birth chart, and get those for free. And the pattern is free as well. There are some buy-ups, but it's pretty robust, the amount of free stuff that's in there. And so, for example, mine for today, like it'll give me a daily vibe for today.
Okay.
Which I read later after I was feeling angsty, still a little bit of this full moon energy just ramped up. And it says, today, try to slow down and sit with your emotions so that you're aware of what forces are going on behind the scenes. With your naturally adventurous streak, it's possible that you may be so focused on a search for truth and meaning that you don't always consider who you are at your core. So again, Capricorn energy, it's all about, oh, gotta do, gotta do, gotta do. And we have to stop and go, yeah, but how am I feeling? And what does this mean to me? And have I factored in some play? I haven't been outside to exercise today, and I definitely need to do that. So there's so much information here that can be useful. And again, some of it's not going to be exactly 100% spot on. But I do have to say that moon astrology and astrology, the more I'm diving into it, that is pretty spot on. It's pretty spot on. Yeah. So those would be the three tools that I might highly recommend people start to get involved. But if you're just looking to follow the moon, those can be really useful tools because it's about managing and not managing, navigating your energy. We are meant to go in a flow, ebb and flow. The tides ebb and flow. They go in and out. Your breath goes in and out. Our cycles as a woman, in and out, right? And that is part of nature. At some point in this podcast, I would love to talk about the Wheel of the Year from the pagan tradition and the other nature-based spiritual traditions, because it mirrors sort of the moon cycles and the fact that summer, the first half of the year is all about increasing light. We're moving from the new moon energy of the winter solstice into the full moon energy of the summer, right? The summer equinox. And so everything's heightened, the days are long. And once we get through that summer solstice, now the days are getting shorter. And nature mirrors that back to us. Everything's growing. And then it's going to get to a harvest. We take what the meaning is, the nourishment from what we've harvested and planted all year long. And then we go into this phase in the fall and winter where it's about slowing down and about enjoying family. And wow, gosh, the nights are getting longer. Great. It's an opportunity for you to get more rest, right? Nature tells us exactly what we need to do for our optimal health and well-being if we quit fighting those natural cycles.
Right.
That's what it's about. Yeah.
I
So.
love that. I love the
Mhm.
idea that even something just as simple as watching the moon phases is such a good starting point to understanding. So I think when I was a younger human, not young, but younger, I definitely would notice I started really watching this pattern in my mental health and my moods and my energy. And I used to keep a tracking calendar. Now,
Yeah.
just what kind of moods I had and how I was feeling and how much work, and because of course everything in my life was measured in work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting now to really, so once I was able to mirror that sort of practice that I had already been in and just kind of watch the way it worked with the cycle of the moon, it wasn't really me looking to the moon to decide in the beginning. It was
Right,
me knowing my cycles and going, huh, that's interesting. And then
right.
just being able to, I think I've heard you say this before, actually, like if I'm going to have something really big happening, I plan it so that I'm not,
Hmm.
because not only does a new moon cycle kind of make me more, maybe edgy is a good word, um, more tired. I'm not as invested in it.
Hmm.
It's kind of that ebb and flow. If I have to expend too much energy, you're not going to get my best.
Right.
It's like people who have, we talk about this in corporate America a lot. People talk about different people have different different rhythms to their day. Some people are like
Yeah,
super
yeah,
on in the morning and they're great. And then some people, but maybe they're in bed by 10 every night and asleep by 10:05.
yeah.
And then there's people who they're not even on their game until 11 a.m.
Right,
or 11 p.m. as the case may be.
right.
And it's kind of that same idea of just
Mhm.
watching for the cues of what it is.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, because and again, it's a tool for getting to know yourself. If you
right.
know yourself as I'm a late starter, but then I finish really strong and I'm
Mhm.
usually on after 6 o'clock. I know
Right.
that about myself. Whereas I'm an early morning person, I fade around 3 o'clock. I do my best work in the front end of my day. So that's my cycle. And so I pay attention to that. I pay
Right.
attention to what foods contribute to me having the best energy during that time
Mhm.
and not depleting it right off the bat, right? So it's not about turning over all of your power to the moon or the astrological
Right.
cycle. It's about learning about those things, where you fit into that whole thing,
Mhm.
and how you can harness it. It's because it's power and you harness it and it can really make a difference. And yes, sometimes you'll find, and we can dive into this next time too, if we wanted to, a little bit more into the astrology. It's not I'm just scratching the surface with my studies on that, but it's been fascinating because just even looking at moon astrology, yes, the new moon is generally going to make us tired
Right.
because we're at our lower energy. However, couple of things. Depending on what sign it's in, there may be some different moods around that you
Sure.
might be experiencing. Not every new moon is going to feel the same. The other thing too is that that's an ideal situation. If you are feeling drawn inward, relaxed, slowing down during the new moon, and you're having your menses around the new moon,
Mhm.
that indicates that you're in harmony with nature. But when a woman, and this is kind of with Ayurveda, if you came to an Ayurvedic doctor and you're like, I have my menses on the full moon, you're not in balance. So clearly, maybe you're highly stressed and you're
Mm.
off your cycle.
Right.
You're off the moon cycle. So again, being in harmony with nature, it's not an exact science, you know what I mean? But it's
Mhm.
a template
Right.
for understanding how can I best move with these energies and where am I out of balance and what do I need to do to bring it back into balance?
Right. How do I bring it back?
Yeah. It's fascinating stuff. I just love talking about the moon. I love talking about moon astrology, progress moon cycles, because it's just been so impactful in my health and well-being.
I think too, it's important for um at least to be open to the so the reason I always bring it back to science,
Hmm.
or
Yeah.
things, more tangible things for people, um,
Yeah.
is sometimes I like to just question, like, okay, well, how would it not have an impact on us if it impacts
Hmm.
the ocean, which is far
Right.
more vast than this
Right.
body that we're in.
Right.
how
Right.
could it not impact us in some way? So I do, I think I appreciate just being able to articulate that in my own brain,
Right.
because
Right.
it doesn't inform my life necessarily, but what it
Hmm.
does is make me aware
Hmm.
and respectful of,
Right.
um, it's like people who, I run into this a lot with the people I surround myself with, where they will be healing from something, and they'll be, they're always in a hurry to get better. And I'm always saying to them, I think this is your body's way of telling you that you just need to maybe slow down and just, it's doing its thing. My
Mhm.
dad, who had surgery, I'm sure he loves that I talk about him. Um, uh, so, um, he he has been tired lately, and I'm like, you had a uh pretty substantial surgery. You were in the hospital for like 6 days. I don't know. So,
Right. Maybe that's part of it. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
like your body is healing inside of itself. So that can be healing from trauma, it can be healing from um uh emotional trauma, physical trauma. I think that that's one of the things I love about it, is just our ability to pay attention to the connections that we as human beings have to all the things around us, because we kind of lose that a
All
little bit.
life.
Right.
Yeah. All of
Yeah.
life. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, when we look back and you talk about science, which I love,
Right.
but
Right.
I do. But there's no, like, if people are like, well, where's the scientific peer-reviewed journal that shows that the new moon does this to our body and the full moon does this, and this is why we should, we don't, because what happened was is that nature-based spirituality practices way back in the day utilized this. There was the Moon Lodge. They followed the moon cycles. That's how, prior to medical science coming on the scene, that's how they made sense of the cycles in our body, because they
Mhm.
paid attention to nature.
Right.
It's only when we decided, oh no, we've got a different, let's study the body
Mhm.
and pick it apart and figure out how it works, and let's do scientific studies and everything like that, that we started to kind of get away from using nature as a template and
Right.
the true doctor, right? So for those who are like, where's the scientific peer review journal? I don't have one. I have generations
Right.
of ancestors who have
Mhm.
utilized these. Ayurveda, again, is got so much. I mean, it's a 5,000, I don't know, maybe even older, 5,000-year-old system that utilizes nature,
Right.
right?
And I love
Ye-
the idea that we can just marry things. Like
Yes,
I
for
don't,
sure.
not people. I've done that twice and it did not work for me.
Mm.
So not people. I'm not advocating for that.
That's a whole
Although,
nother podcast.
right,
Same
right,
here.
that's
Yeah,
different.
no, yeah.
But I love the idea that we can marry these things, because I absolutely, again, as I enter the second half of my life, one
Oh,
of the things
good.
that I have loved is that I'm just learning to be in rhythm with nature
Mhm,
and the seasons, and
mhm.
even just things like eating. My golden girl and I were just talking. Hi. My golden girl and I were just discussing this the other day, about how sometimes when you go to the grocery store and you get grapes, they're
Yeah,
really good. And sometimes you go and you get them and they're just nasty. And
they're
it
shriveled
was
up.
right.
Yeah,
This is grapes. Literally, we were talking about
yeah.
grapes. But what it really came down to is just eating things in season. And then
Yes.
I was reminded of my beautiful friend Angie, who is very educated in the ways of health and well-being. And I remember many of the things that you've shared about how different seasons call for different foods. Uh,
Mhm.
in many traditions. Like maybe
Yes.
you don't want to eat a bunch of spicy hot food right now in the middle when you're already dying of heat because it's 81 with 90% humidity outside or whatever. Um, So
I
I
like
did,
the spice. Yeah,
right,
it's a challenging
right,
thing. Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
So
sure.
yeah, so we were talking about how we would prefer to eat things as they are coming into season in our life. We get a CSA box, whatever they bring us is what we're eating, and it's so exciting because we never know what we're gonna get until Thursday,
Right?
and it's delivered
Yeah.
on Friday. So but it really has been just this kind of this lovely expression as it's like, oh yeah, that of course that makes sense. This
Right.
is when nature is producing these things, and I can eat them now when they're at their freshest and they're not made in
Mhm.
a, grown in a hot house somewhere. Not that a hot house isn't lovely.
Right. No,
Uh,
I mean, it extends. I think the thing is that we're not demonizing the hothouse, the greenhouse,
right,
trucking in fruits and vegetables from other places that have a longer growing season.
right.
That's a blessing, and it is a direct result of demand.
Yes, yeah,
And we can still help with some of that by, like what you said, eating in season,
yeah,
right?
yes.
It's why, again, we talk about cycles as we move through the harvest, right? What's coming in season right now? Sweet corn, sweet corn, sweet corn, right? That's what's growing, that's what's being harvested. As we move into the fall where it starts to get colder, from Ayurveda's perspective, we'll talk about that another time. It's root vegetables,
Yes.
right? Because they're coming now in season and they can be stored through the winter. And root, it's heavy, it's earthy, it
Mhm,
grounds us, it sustains us. Warm, cooked root vegetables, potatoes, sweet potatoes, those kinds of
mhm,
things are typically what they would eat in the winter time because that was what was available and that's
right.
what sustains us. Why do we feel all of a sudden in March and April like, oh gosh, yeah, I feel like having some greens, something cool and refreshing?
Mhm,
Because that's what's growing. That's
yeah.
what's coming into season is the arugula and some of the early vegetables are coming into season at
Mhm,
that point. And it helps us to, it's astringent. It's the bitter greens that help us to take off the excess weight that we may have put on over the winter holidays because we're trying to survive by having the heavier foods, right?
mhm,
Summer in order to beat the heat. What's going to make you feel more cool? Cucumber, or something else that's really like, I'm going to have, nobody wakes up in the morning on a hot August morning and goes, I'm going to have a warm, steaming bowl of oatmeal. Maybe
right,
you do, and that's fine. It's still healthy, but I will have overnight oats that's been
right.
chilled in the fridge, or I
Yes.
will have, something cooling because my
Mhm,
body's apples. Here's an interesting one from an Ayurvedic perspective. They often say apples, if you look at, they come in season right around August, September timeframe, right? This is when our temperatures tend to be at their highest, even though our days are getting shorter, right? We have our Indian summers. Sorry, that's probably not the right term, but we have that summer, that late summer where it's really hot and we take on that heat. But do you know applesauce, apples, pulls heat from the body,
oh, I love that.
pulls inflammation from the body. The brat diet, what is the A in the brat diet?
Apples.
Applesauce. Why
Mm,
do they give you that? Because it's easy to digest and it helps remove heat from the body. So in the height of summer, eat your apples because that's going to help you to reduce inflammation. So yeah, it's really fascinating. I mean, it's not just and whether you believe in astrology or not, we are one planet in an incredibly vast, infinite universe
mhm,
of mysteries. And the more that we try to learn about those cycles and how, like, there's just no way in my mind, knowing what I know and what I've learned, there's just no way that nature doesn't have an impact on us. Why? Because we are part of nature.
right.
And the more we study nature, the more we get to know ourselves. And
Yes,
that's how we can come into harmony with our bodies, with our minds, with spirit, with nature. Oh, so great.
I
So
know
great.
it is. It
Mm.
does, it does help to create kind of this beautiful um connection or cohesion in my life when I'm not fighting against the
Yes.
season, or I'm not fighting against the cycle, or when my body tells me that I need to rest,
Yeah.
then I
Yeah.
rest. Not like to my own detriment.
Right.
Every once in a while I'll come home and I'll be like, I really just need to go to bed. And I will have a 12-hour sleep, and it is likely I'm fighting a bug or something has
Yeah.
happened, but whatever it is, my body needed it. And I have
Yeah.
gotten much better about just listening to myself as um as I have aged and gotten more in tune with the way that nature and the seasons and cycles work. I
Yeah.
realize how very at the very core we
Yeah.
are that. We also
Yeah.
hibernate. We also
Yes.
you know, have more
Yes.
energy at different, we all thrive off of these very similar sorts of
Yeah.
things, which I love. It's so
Yeah.
lovely. So
I
lovely.
do too. And it's, you said something in there too that I want to just kind of tie it up with, is that it's about listening to your body.
Mm,
Like, it's not just about listening to nature and paying attention. It's about being observant and listening to your body. Because there's that old adage that if you don't listen to your body's whispers, you're going to have to pay attention when your body is screaming.
yes.
And you had mentioned, I mean, how many of you out there, drop us a comment below, have ever been running yourself ragged
Mhm.
and your body, had you been paying attention, the signs were there, right? You're starting to get a little sniffle. You're starting to feel really tired. You're less focused. You're having to rely more on coffee. You're not getting as much sleep. And now you've got this weird kind of pain, this plantar fasciitis in your heel that is preventing you from going on your daily runs or whatever.
Yeah,
You think it's a structural thing,
yeah,
right? You think it's just, oh, it's an illness or an injury or something. But how often was it that you didn't pay attention and then you slammed into a wall, you rolled an ankle, or now you can't go running because of the plantar fasciitis, or you've injured yourself, or you got sick with
right.
a bug? Because your body gave you all of these signs and whispers saying, hey, I think you need to slow down. It's a new moon. Look, maybe you should slow down and get
Right,
some extra rest. Don't go out. Don't go running. Don't
right.
push yourself. Come on. Yeah, we're going to give you a few little hints here. And if you don't pay attention, because that's happened to me, it's
Yes,
like, oh
of
my
course.
God, why am I dealing with this thing? And it's because my body's keeps trying to tell me, we don't want you to work
And I
that
keep
hard.
ignoring it because I
Right. You're gonna
know
keep ignoring
better.
it. Yeah. Oh, exactly. Because I know better.
Because I
Exactly.
know better. Because I just have these things to do. I do this. I love mowing the lawn.
I
It's
do too. I do
sickness
too.
I have.
That's
I
an
love yard
accomplishment.
work, right? It's just, it feels good. So I have this nasty habit of going out. Doesn't matter how hot. I use lots of sunscreen, hence the reason I'm still pasty white, which is great.
Yeah.
Um, so I go out and I do my thing, and Jen has mentioned multiple times that if she's not here, she'll see me on the Ring doorbell camera. I'm essentially crawling up the stairs after I've thrown up probably in the yard somewhere,
Oh,
because I drank all my water and now I'm dying. But there was just one more tree to chop down out of the side of the, whatever thing I'm doing. So I do tend to get a little like, and so I am a work in progress. I'm complicated. I'm a work in
we're
progress.
all, we're all, listen, we all are that way. I think that's the whole point of this podcast now, is that we're shifting more into how do we get to know ourselves so well? What are the tools that we can use to help really get to know our body, mind, and spirit so
Right.
intimately so that we can live with such great harmony,
Mhm.
greater peace and understanding of ourselves and others, so that our life has more meaning than just, it's just another day and I'm
Right,
just making my way towards the end of my string,
right. And joy. And so that we
right?
have more joy. So,
Yes, joy.
right? That's
Sure.
it. Yeah, it's like a gratitude journal. So something that I want to say before we leave here today is
Mhm.
I'm just gonna absolutely recommend to every single person who encounters this to really challenge yourself, first of all, to just start taking a temperature of yourself every day, not physically, but like emotionally, mentally.
Right.
Like how am I doing?
Mhm.
Keep track of it in a journal.
Yeah.
And then go back and look at the moon signs, or go back and look at what nature was doing and see how it pairs up. Because that was the biggest surprise I think of my life, is um the pieces of me that noticed the ebb and flow of my life when I looked back, and I was able to merge those with the moon phases. It's like, oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I
You get
don't,
the
I didn't.
picture and it's like, oh, it's right there.
Yeah, dang it.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be wrong. Didn't want it to be
No.
so easy. Yeah, so yeah, but just pay attention. Like
Mhm.
take 2 minutes every day and just pay attention to what you're feeling and what the universe is telling you and what the season is or what the mood is,
Yeah.
and just
Yeah.
what you're going through, because putting there's something magical about putting it down and being aware. Um
Yeah.
yeah, which
Yes.
makes all the difference
Yeah,
in the world.
that's the thing. It's part of the awareness. You can't, I mean, well, you could just go, "Oh, yeah, I'm noticing this today," but you're gonna forget it, you know?
Right.
So having your own journals or a way that you're tracking it for your own good, it's about what do you do with that information? How do you learn from that knowledge and do things differently?
Mhm.
I'm actually healthier now in my 50s than I was in my 30s.
Yeah, same.
You know, just and I'm talking about, I I don't know that I have the same waist size as in my
I
30s.
don't.
But and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about full-blown well-being
Mhm.
is very much different now and better, in my opinion, than it was in my 30s when I was not even aware of this stuff.
Right.
So, yeah. So hopefully if you're following along with us, we're going to wrap up our session for tonight. But stick with us. And if there's a specific question you want to know about spiritual health and well-being, physical health and well-being, tools we might recommend, drop us a note and we'd love to add that because we've got our list. And now that we've talked a little bit about the moon cycle, I think next time we should talk about a little bit of Ayurveda and the starting to really dive deep. It'll be not deep, but um, an exploration of the wheel of the year and the
Love it.
cycles of nature.
Love the
So,
cycles of nature.
yeah, same. So let's do that next time. And in the meantime, thank you for this lovely conversation about
Yeah.
the moon. And thank you to our listeners for joining us. And we hope to see you next time on another episode of Oh for Dying Out Loud, because we're living.
Yes.
Yay!
Sound.
Hi, everybody.